Call 911. Somebody help her. Call 911 right now.
She collapsed in front of 20 executives during the most important presentation of her life. Her body hit the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the boardroom. And when she woke up in that hospital bed 3 hours later, she found a resignation letter in her bag, written in her own handwriting that she had absolutely no memory of writing. But what happened next? What her billionaire CEO did at 5 in the morning when he walked into that hospital room changed everything. Not just for her, but for hundreds of employees who had been silently breaking under the same impossible weight. This is the story of Maya Thornton, a single mother who worked herself into oblivion, and the man who finally understood what his ambition had cost. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments and what time it is. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, kindly subscribe to the channel for more stories. Your support keeps us going. Maya Thornton woke up every morning at 5:15 a.m., not because she wanted to, but because that was the only way to survive. Her alarm would scream into the darkness of her small 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Seattle, and for exactly 3 seconds, she would lie there in bed, eyes closed, pretending that today might be different. Then she would remember the overdue electric bill sitting on her kitchen counter. She would remember the tuition payment for her daughter's school that was due in 2 weeks. She would remember the way her boss, Garrett Whitmore, had looked at her during last week's meeting when she suggested pushing back a deadline, his eyes cold and disappointed, as if she had personally betrayed him. And just like that, the 3 seconds would end. Maya would throw off her blanket, swing her legs out of bed, and begin another day of trying to be everything to everyone while slowly disappearing into nothing. Her daughters, 10-year-old Zara and 7-year-old Imani, were still asleep when Maya started her morning routine. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, careful not to wake them yet because these quiet moments, these stolen minutes before the chaos began, were the only peace she had. She made coffee, black and strong. No time for cream or sugar. She checked her phone and immediately regretted it. 17 new emails since she had gone to bed at midnight. 4 of them were from Garrett, time-stamped at 2:47 District Point, 3:16 and 4:20 a.m. The subject lines were all variations of the same demand. Project Vanguard updates needed ASAP and board presentation revisions, priority 1. Maya felt her chest tighten. She had worked until midnight on those revisions. What more could he possibly want? She opened the first email. Garrett's message was brief and cutting, the way all his messages were. Maya, the financial projections in slides 18 through 24 don't account for the Q3 market volatility I mentioned in yesterday's call. This needs to be corrected before the board meeting tomorrow. Also, the risk assessment section feels thin. Bulk it up with data from the Morrison report. I need this on my desk by 7 a.m. No excuses. Maya looked at the time. It was 5:23 a.m. That gave her an hour and 37 minutes to redo an entire section of a presentation she had already spent weeks perfecting. She closed her eyes and took a breath so deep it hurt. Then she opened her laptop and got to work. By 6:45, Maya had made the corrections, sent the updated presentation to Garrett, and moved on to waking up her daughters. Zara was easier. She was 10, responsible, already half awake when Maya gently shook her shoulder. Imani, on the other hand, was 7 and believed that mornings were a personal attack on her happiness. Maya had to coax her out of bed with promises of chocolate chip pancakes, even though they both knew there was no time for pancakes. Maya dropped the girls off at school at 7:30, kissed them both goodbye, and told them she loved them more than anything in the world. Zara hugged her tight and whispered, "I know, Mom. Good luck today." Imani just waved and ran off to join her friends on the playground. Maya sat in her car for a moment, watching them through the chain-link fence, and wondered when she had become the kind of mother who had to apologize for cereal. Then she put the car in drive and headed to North Point Ventures, the gleaming 40-story glass tower downtown, where she worked as a senior financial analyst. Where Garrett Whitmore, the founder and CEO, ruled with an iron fist, wrapped in expensive suits and motivational jargon about excellence and commitment. North Point Ventures was the kind of company people bragged about working for. It was prestigious, high-paying, and brutally competitive. Garrett had built it from nothing 15 years ago, turning a small venture capital firm into a billion-dollar empire. He was 42 years old, Caucasian, handsome, in that sharp-edged way that came from never sleeping and always winning. He was on the cover of Forbes twice. He gave TED Talks about sustainable success and empowering teams, and every word of it was a lie. Because behind the polished PR and the inspirational LinkedIn posts, Garrett Whitmore was a man who sent emails at 3 a.m. and expected responses by dawn. He was a man who called mandatory strategy meetings on Sundays. He was a man who once told Maya in front of the entire executive team that work-life balance is just an excuse people use when they're not hungry enough. Maya hated him. But she also needed him. Because 3 years ago, when her husband walked out on her and their 2 daughters, leaving her with nothing but debt and a credit score in the low 500s, North Point Ventures had hired her. They had given her a salary that pulled her family out of poverty. They had given her health insurance that covered Imani's asthma medication and Zara's braces. They had given her a chance to prove that she, a black woman who grew up in foster care and fought her way through community college while working 3 jobs, belonged in rooms where people like her were rarely seen. So she stayed, and she worked, and she endured, because what other choice did she have? The office was already buzzing when Maya arrived at 8 a.m. She scanned her badge, took the elevator to the 32nd floor, and walked into the open-plan workspace where her team sat. The energy was tense. Everyone was on edge. Project Vanguard, the $50 million venture deal that Maya had been leading for the past 4 months, was coming to a head. Tomorrow, she would present the final financial forecast and risk assessment to the board of directors. If they approved it, North Point would greenlight the deal and Maya's career would skyrocket. If they didn't, well, she tried not to think about that. Her colleague David, a 35-year-old analyst with perpetual dark circles under his eyes, looked up from his computer as she passed. "You look exhausted," he said. Maya laughed, a hollow sound. "Thanks, David. You really know how to make a girl feel special." He didn't smile. "I'm serious, Maya. When's the last time you took a day off?" She thought about it. She honestly couldn't remember. "I'll take a day off after the board meeting," she said. David shook his head. "That's what you said last month, and the month before that." Maya didn't respond. She just sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and started working. The day passed in a blur of spreadsheets, conference calls, and corrections. Garrett sent 3 more emails with urgent revisions. Maya's manager, Claire, a nervous woman who reported directly to Garrett, stopped by her desk twice to remind her, "Garrett is really counting on you for this one, and we can't afford any mistakes." By 3 p.m, Maya's head was pounding. She hadn't eaten lunch. She had barely drunk any water. Her hands were shaking from too much coffee and too little sleep, but she kept working. She had to. The board meeting was tomorrow at 10. She had 16 hours to make sure everything was perfect. At 6 p.m, Maya's phone rang. It was Zara. "Mom, where are you?" her daughter asked, and Maya could hear the disappointment in her voice even through the phone. Maya looked at the time and felt her stomach drop. She had promised to pick them up from aftercare by 6. It was now 6:15. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm still at work. Can you and Imani wait with Miss Rodriguez for another hour? I'll be there as soon as I can." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Zara said in a voice far too mature for a 10-year-old, "It's okay, Mom. Mrs. Chen said she can take us home." Mrs. Chen was their neighbor, a retired teacher who had become a surrogate grandmother to the girls. She picked them up more often than Maya did these days. "Tell Mrs. Chen thank you," Maya said, her voice cracking. "And tell her I'll be home by 8. We can have dinner together." Another pause. "Okay, Mom. Love you." The line went dead. Maya sat there, phone in hand, staring at the black screen. She felt the tears coming, hot and angry, and she stood up abruptly, grabbed her purse, and walked quickly to the women's restroom. She locked herself in a stall, sat down on the closed toilet seat, and allowed herself exactly 2 minutes to cry. She set a timer on her phone. 2 minutes. That was all she could afford. When the timer went off, she wiped her face, took a deep breath, and went back to her desk. Back to the spreadsheets, back to Garrett's impossible standards, back to the life that was slowly killing her. That night, Maya didn't get home until 9:30. The girls were already asleep. Mrs. Chen was sitting on the couch, watching a rerun of a game show, and she smiled kindly when Maya walked in. "They ate dinner. I made spaghetti. There's leftovers in the fridge if you're hungry." Maya thanked her, saw her out, and then stood in the doorway of her daughter's bedroom, watching them sleep. Zara was curled up with a book still in her hands. Imani was sprawled out like a starfish, her mouth slightly open. Maya wanted to wake them up. She wanted to hug them and tell them she was sorry. But she didn't. She just stood there, feeling like a stranger in her own home, and then she went to her room, set her alarm for 5:15, and collapsed into bed. The next morning was the board meeting. Maya woke up feeling like she had been hit by a truck. She had slept maybe 3 hours. Her head was pounding. Her hands were still shaking. She drank 2 cups of coffee, kissed her daughters goodbye without really seeing them, and drove to North Point in a daze. By the time she arrived, her heart was racing. She had done everything she could. The presentation was perfect. The numbers were solid. She just had to get through the next 2 hours, and then it would be over. The boardroom was on the 40th floor, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 20 executives sat around a long mahogany table, all of them in tailored suits, all of them watching her with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. Garrett sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Maya set up her laptop, connected it to the projector, and took a deep breath. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, I'm going to walk you through the final financial forecast for Project Vanguard, including our risk assessment and projected ROI over the next 5 years. Her voice sounded steady, professional, like she wasn't falling apart inside. She clicked to the first slide and began her presentation. For the first 15 minutes, everything went smoothly. She talked through the numbers, answered questions, responded to concerns. The executives nodded. Garrett watched her with that intense, unblinking stare he always had. Maya was halfway through slide 18 when she felt it, a wave of dizziness, sudden and overwhelming. The room tilted. She gripped the edge of the podium to steady herself. As you can see in the Q3 projections, she continued, her voice starting to slur, the market volatility accounts for a 7.3% fluctuation in RORCU. The words blurred together. The numbers on the screen started to multiply, dancing in front of her eyes. Ms. Thornton, are you all right? Someone asked. Maya blinked. She couldn't tell who had spoken. The voices around the table were muffled, like she was underwater. She opened her mouth to respond, to say she was fine, but no words came out. Her legs buckled. The room spun. And then, in front of 20 executives and the man who controlled her livelihood, Maya Thornton collapsed. Her body hit the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the boardroom, and the last thing she heard before everything went black was Garrett Whitmore's voice, sharp and panicked, shouting for someone to call 911. Maya woke up 3 hours later in a hospital bed. The fluorescent lights above her were too bright. There was an IV in her arm. Her head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. She turned her head slowly and saw Zara and Imani asleep in chairs beside her bed, their small bodies curled up under thin hospital blankets. Mrs. Chen was sitting in the corner, knitting something, and when she saw Maya's eyes open, she smiled with relief. Oh, thank God. You scared us half to death, dear. Maya tried to sit up, but her body felt like lead. What happened? She croaked. Mrs. Chen set down her knitting and came to the bedside. You collapsed during your work meeting. They brought you here in an ambulance. The doctor said it was exhaustion and dehydration. You've been running yourself into the ground, Maya. Maya closed her eyes. Exhaustion, dehydration. She almost laughed. Of course. That's what you get when you work 90-hour weeks and forget to eat. That's what you get when you sacrifice everything for a company that sees you as a replaceable cog in a machine. She looked at her daughters, still sleeping, and felt a wave of shame, so intense it took her breath away. What kind of mother was she? What kind of example was she setting? She reached for her purse on the bedside table, needing to check her phone, needing to see if Garrett had sent her an email about the meeting, about what happened, about whether she still had a job. But when she opened her purse, something else caught her eye. A piece of paper, folded neatly, tucked between her wallet and her phone. She pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a resignation letter, handwritten, signed, dated, and it was in her handwriting. Dear Mr. Whitmore, it read. I am writing to formally resign from my position at North Point Ventures, effective immediately. I can no longer continue to work under conditions that are destroying my health and stealing time from my children. I have given everything I have to this company, and it has taken everything from me in return. I am done. Sincerely, Maya Thornton. She stared at the letter, her heart pounding. She didn't remember writing it. She had no memory of sitting down and putting these words on paper. But the handwriting was hers. The signature was hers. It must have happened sometime in the last few days, maybe late at night, when she was so exhausted she couldn't think straight. A message from her subconscious, crying out for escape. Mrs. Chen saw the look on Maya's face. "What is it, dear?" Maya handed her the letter without a word. Mrs. Chen read it, her expression softening with understanding. "Oh, Maya," she said quietly, "your body was trying to tell you something." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't even remember writing it." Mrs. Chen squeezed her hand. "Maybe that's the point." It was just after 5 a.m. when Maya heard footsteps in the hallway outside her hospital room. She assumed it was a nurse coming to check her vitals, but then the door opened, and Garrett Whitmore walked in. Not a lawyer, not an HR representative. Garrett himself. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his hair was disheveled, his eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. He was holding 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee, and when he saw that Maya was awake, he stopped in the doorway, as if suddenly unsure whether he should be there. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. Maya was too shocked to say no. She just nodded. Garrett walked over to the chair beside her bed, the one Mrs. Chen had vacated to give them privacy, and sat down. He handed her one of the coffees. She took it, even though she didn't want it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Garrett stared at the floor. Maya stared at him, waiting. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry." 2 words, simple, but they landed in the room like a bomb. Maya blinked. "You're sorry?" Garrett nodded, still not looking at her. "For what happened yesterday, for what I've been doing to you, to everyone." He paused, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. "I've been a terrible boss. No, worse than that. I've been destroying people, and I convinced myself it was for a good cause, for the company, for success. But the truth is, I've been running from something, and I've been dragging everyone else down with me." Maya didn't know what to say. She had imagined this conversation 100 times in her head, but it had never gone like this. Garrett looked up at her finally, and she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Vulnerability, pain. "3 years ago," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "my younger brother Marcus took his own life. He was 29. He was struggling with depression, and I knew it. He called me 17 times in the week before he died. 17 times. And I was too busy closing deals and chasing growth to answer. I told myself I would call him back when I had time, but I never did. And then he was gone." Maya felt her chest tighten. She hadn't known. No one had known. Garrett's personal life was a locked vault. He never talked about family. He never talked about anything that wasn't work. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Garrett shook his head. "I don't deserve your sympathy. After Marcus died, I threw myself into work. I convinced myself that if I could just work hard enough, if I could just build something big enough, it would make up for the fact that I failed him. But all I did was create a company culture that treats people like machines. I've been punishing myself, and I've been punishing everyone around me. And yesterday, when you collapsed, I saw Marcus. I saw what happens when you push people beyond their limits. And I realized I've been doing the same thing to you that I did to him. I've been ignoring the signs. I've been too busy to care." Maya felt tears running down her face. She didn't try to stop them. Garrett reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this on the floor of the boardroom after they took you away," he said, handing it to her. It was her resignation letter, the one she had written in a fugue state and forgotten about. "I read it," Garrett said. "And you're right about all of it. You shouldn't have to resign, Maya. I should be the one stepping down. But instead, I'm asking you not to quit. I'm asking you to stay and help me fix this. Not just for you, but for everyone." Maya looked at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" Garrett leaned forward. "I want to offer you a partnership, 5% equity in the company, a significant salary increase, and I want you to lead a new division I'm creating. the Sustainable Performance Division. Your job will be to redesign our entire work culture from the ground up. Set policies around work-life integration, mental health support, realistic expectations. I want you to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else here. I want you to hold me accountable. Maya stared at him, speechless. This was the last thing she had expected. Why me? She asked. Garrett smiled sadly. Because you're the one who almost died trying to meet my impossible standards. Because you're the one who had the courage to write that letter, even if you don't remember writing it. Because I trust you to tell me the truth, even when it's hard to hear. So what do you say, Maya? Will you help me fix this? Maya looked over at her daughters, still asleep in their chairs. She thought about the life she had been living, the endless cycle of exhaustion and guilt. She thought about the resignation letter, the message her body had sent when her mind couldn't. And then she thought about all the other people at North Point who were suffering in silence, who were sacrificing their health and their families because they thought they had no other choice. She looked back at Garrett. I'll do it, she said. But we're doing this my way. No more 3 a.m. emails. No more Sunday meetings. No more making people choose between their jobs and their lives. If I'm going to lead this division, I need your word that you'll support me, even when it's hard. Garrett nodded, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked like a human being instead of a corporate robot. You have my word, he said. They shook hands, there in that hospital room at dawn, and Maya felt something shift inside her. Not hope exactly, but possibility. The possibility that things could be different, that she could be different, that she didn't have to burn herself out to prove her worth. 6 months later, North Point Ventures looked like a different company. Maya had implemented a strict no-contact policy after 7 p.m. and before 7 a.m. She had hired 2 additional analysts to distribute the workload more evenly. She had instituted mandatory mental health days and quarterly check-in with employees to assess burnout. She had partnered with therapists to offer free counseling services, and slowly, carefully, the culture began to change. People started leaving the office at reasonable hours. They started taking vacations without guilt. They started talking openly about stress and boundaries. Garrett kept his promise. He went to therapy to process his grief over Marcus. He stopped sending emails at 3 a.m. He started asking his employees how they were doing and actually listening to the answers. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. But it was better. So much better. And Maya, for the first time in years, felt like she could breathe. She made it to Zara's soccer games. She helped Imani with her homework. She made pancakes on Saturday mornings. She was present. Not perfect, but present. And that was enough. One evening, about 8 months after her collapse, Maya was tucking Imani into bed when her daughter looked up at her and said, "Mommy, I like you better now." Maya smiled. "Better than what, baby?" Imani thought about it. "Better than before. You smile more now. You're here more. It feels like you're really my mommy again, not just someone who lives here." Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion. She kissed Imani's forehead and whispered, "I'm so sorry I was gone for so long, sweetheart. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." As Maya turned off the light and closed the door, she thought about that resignation letter, the one she had written in a moment of desperation and couldn't remember. In a strange way, it had saved her life. It had forced her to confront the truth she had been avoiding, that she couldn't keep going the way she was, that something had to change. And it had. Not because she was stronger than everyone else, but because she finally admitted she was breaking. And sometimes, that admission is the bravest thing you can do. So let me ask you something. Have you ever worked for someone who demanded everything from you and gave nothing back? Have you ever felt like you had to choose between your job and your family? Between your career and your health? And if you were in Maya's position, if you found a resignation letter in your own handwriting that you didn't remember writing, what would you do? Would you walk away? Or would you stay and fight to change things? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about your own life and the choices you're making, please consider subscribing. We share stories like this, stories about people facing real struggles, because we believe that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply acknowledge that we're all just trying to survive, and that it's okay to admit when we're not okay. Click that subscribe button for more timeless stories that will touch your heart and keep you thinking long after the video ends. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are worth more than your productivity. You are enough, exactly as you are.